Rudy Giuliani appeared in a New York City court today to answer to a federal judge after failing to surrender his valuables as part of a $148 million defamation judgment. The two former Georgia election workers who were awarded the judgment went to Giuliani's apartment last week, only to find it had been cleared out weeks earlier. News Nation's Rich McHugh has the latest.
Hey, it was a bit of cat and mouse inside court today between the judge and former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani. The judge ordering Giuliani to turn over his assets immediately, effectively. Giuliani saying he wasn't sure where some of them even are. Outside court, Giuliani addressed the crowd that had gathered. Take a listen.
Yeah, I'm going to turn over what I'm supposed to turn over when they figure out what that is. This has never been a trial. I never had a trial. I owe $145 million for never having a trial on liability or damages.
Giuliani continued. He said this is political persecution. He said this is not a trial, by the way, and the reason they're coming after me because I uncovered Hunter Biden's laptop. Now, just to put in context for our audience, after losing the $150 million defamation case dating back to 2020, the election, the judge ordered him to turn over these assets, including his $5 million apartment, a Mercedes previously owned by Lauren Bacall, a TV, Joe DiMaggio signed shirt, and 26 luxury watches. Now, inside court, the judge expressed concern over Giuliani's non-compliance. Judge Lehman ordered Rudy Giuliani to surrender his assets. Giuliani said he didn't know where his assets were. The judge denied a request from Giuliani's legal team to reschedule. The judge ordered that the Mercedes be turned over by next Monday, indicating that continued delays were unacceptable. The main defense argument was that Giuliani should not be forced to turn over assets while his appeal is pending, but this argument was not successful. The judge couldn't have been more stern. He told Giuliani he ordered him to turn over his assets. He said as a series of deadlines for next week, and said if he does not comply, he could end up in contempt of court. Back to you.
Rich McHugh, thank you. One of the biggest surprises of the 2024 election was the surge in support for Donald Trump among Latino voters. Exit polls show he benefited from a 14 percentage point bump from 2020, including in major swing states. This after certain rhetoric on migrants in Puerto Rico made some people sure it'd end up hurting his chances. To break down what happened, we're joined now by Rafael Bernal, who covers Latino politics for The Hill. Rafael, thanks for joining us. Let's talk about the Latino vote. Trump saw a big surge in support among this very key demographic, particularly among Latino men. So what led to the surge?
Well, I mean, we still have to see the final numbers if there were divisions by national origin and so on. But the one thing that we could tell immediately as it was happening, is that most Latinos, and especially Latinos who voted for Trump, weren't voting really, their voting wasn't tied to their Latino identity. The economic message, I think that was key. The economic message put out by Trump and the sort of counter messaging about Harris's own economic message, basically, you know, whether it was calling her a communist or making her quote unquote responsible for the disaster. He was able to tie any complaints any of these voters had about the economy. Trump was very effective at tying them to Kamala Harris, and she was never able to break through with her sort of populist message. Right now things are tough because of billionaires instead of things are tough because of the Biden administration.
Right, so since it wasn't exactly tied to their identity the way they voted, is that why some of the rhetoric that we heard, particularly in the weeks leading up to the election, didn't sway their votes maybe as some people anticipated?
Definitely, it's just a question of priorities, and more Latinos made the prioritized, especially men, prioritized that economic message, or maybe, you know, whatever message Trump was putting out above any sort of identity-fueled vote. Obviously, many of the people who voted for Harris, still a majority of the community at large, among them, obviously, identity was a larger priority, but it wasn't, it just, identity is not the glue that holds the community together at this point, from a political standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, it's just something that shocked so many people. But looking back, how has support changed for Latino voters over the past 10 or 20 years? Have you noticed any significant changes or anything interesting?
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake in how we measured it was the high watermark that Democrats had. Barack Obama reaching like the low 70s, maybe even 75% support. That was a high watermark. That was not the base of Latino voter. We knew from the George W. Bush era that Latinos were swingier voters in general, and that they could go for a more conservative message. I think the mistaken read there was that they voted for Bush because he could speak Spanish and wore boots and was from Texas. I think that it's worth revisiting that and thinking maybe it's other parts of W's message that got to them. Maybe it's the other parts of Obama's message that got to them.
Yeah. So one thing I've also been wondering about is how the Harris campaign really made abortion a big part of their campaign and their message. Do you think that played a role at all in how Latinos voted? Because we do know that a lot of them are deeply religious and Catholic. So is that something that you think could have pushed them more towards Trump?
I think for evangelicals, yes, but evangelicals were already very prone to voting for Trump. It does partly explain the gender gap. It's a huge gender gap among Latinos, but it shows us once again that Latinos voted like the general electorate, that they were just swayable voters throughout the country, and many concentrated in key states.
Right, they're not a monolith.
Yeah. It's almost like cliche. It's like, okay, now it's proven. Right?
Yeah.
We're never going back to that.
Yeah. So day one of the next Trump administration, I think we can all assume is going to be immigration-heavy policy about the border, immigration, and so on. What do you think we can expect in those early days about policies that he wants to push through, deportations, et cetera? What do you think we should expect?
Well, there's a range of things. It can go from showmanship to actual shock and awe to very aggressive enforcement. I have the impression it's going to be more very aggressive enforcement because the elements of Trump world who prioritize immigration enforcement and who prioritize really showing the world that they aim to close the border and they aim to deport millions of people. They're very powerful elements within the Trump administration, well, the coming Trump administration.
Do you anticipate that he'll have a lot of legislative pushback with things like that, though?
Well, we're still waiting for the House. If he goes too far, he might find legislative pushback, but we don't know. I'm not sure where the line is for any Republican right now. How much enforcement is too much enforcement?
Yeah, that will be interesting to see because, like you said, we also don't exactly know the breakdown just yet. But one thing that's been getting a lot of attention is the role of tariffs and tariffs that Trump wants to implement in his second term and what that would mean for the U.S. and American workers. But what about Mexico? What would this mean for Mexico's economy if these tariffs that Trump is talking about were to be implemented?
Oh, it's an existential threat. That's why there's such a good negotiating tool. They worked for Trump under former President López Obrador. It does seem like this time, the way he campaigned, it's more likely that he wants to implement tariffs, that tariffs are the point and not just a negotiating tool. But that, again, might be just another element to give them credibility. And he'll be facing a very different president, very allied to López Obrador, Claudia Sheinbaum. But she hasn't been tested on the world stage. She does have an experienced team. She's very educated. She knows, she speaks English, which López Obrador didn't. That might be an advantage for her negotiating with Trump. But it will be a test, and it is an existential threat for Mexico's economy.
Yeah, it feels like she'll definitely be on the world stage now.
Oh,
I mean...
she's going to be thrust on the world stage, whether she likes it or not.
Yeah, and just because Mexico, it feels like that was a pretty big policy towards Mexico was a big part of Trump's first term. And so the second term, it's not just immigration, right? We also hear a lot about fentanyl coming over the border, cartels, etc. Do you think Trump is going to make any moves in that regard? What do you expect to see there?
I mean, on your first point, when he came in last time, China was our top trading partner. Now it's Mexico, like bigger than Canada, bigger than China. So that relationship is now important to the American consumer, at least, if not to the American worker, because of back and forth trade.
Right.
Anything that he does to counteract organized crime in Mexico, if there is going too far, where the Mexican government will recoil. And obviously that's any sort of military action on Mexican territory.
Sure.
I think Claudia Sheinbaum would be ready to toss that economic relationship, that trade relationship that is the core of Mexico's economy, to avoid that happening, to avoid sort of U.S. military action on Mexican territory. That is sort of it's a life or death essential. Top 100% of Mexicans in the country are going to agree with, well, probably 90%. There's never 100%. Yeah. But it is a very, it's an existential point for Mexicans. But short of that, he's going to pressure Sheinbaum to do a lot on immigration and on combating international crime, organized crime.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see what happens. Lots to watch for.
It'll be an exciting 4 years.
Yes, Rafael Bernal, thank you so much.
Thank you.
In the meantime, many residents in Ventura County, California, just north of Los Angeles, are evacuating due to a rapidly spreading wildfire. The fire, nicknamed the Mountain Fire, started just yesterday morning and has already grown to 14,500 acres, with the latest reports showing 0% containment. Our partners at Next Our Nation's KTLA have the latest.
An eerie flicker has taken over the night sky in this Camarillo neighborhood. Hotspots consuming homes left ravaged by the wind-driven mountain fire. Homes burned to their foundations, charred cars sitting on driveways.
I feel terrible for everyone, but especially these folks over here.
Corey Bavaro of Simi Valley was able to get to her friend's home on Sudario Court and retrieve half a dozen cats trapped inside.
I talked with my friend. She said, hey, do you think I should keep him there? And I said, well, I'll just be honest. I think if it's my animals, you never know. Nothing's bulletproof except being out of the situation. So
you're a good friend.
Well, she's a good lady.
Through the devastation, acts of kindness are emerging.
We have a little damage in the back of our house, but we're, considering we've been pretty lucky.
Larry Oliver's home was left unscathed, so he's helping put out hot spots with a water bucket and a garden hose.
Just seeing these homes go up in flames, your neighbors' homes, does it seem like a nightmare?
It's surreal. So I mean, just going from a crazy election to this all in 24 hours is just nuts.
The catastrophic Santa Ana wind event caught many by surprise. It was a mad dash to save people and animals. Preston here wrangled his horses.
Too many donkeys, a mini horse, and another quarter or a thoroughbred I have to get.
Now that Vice President Harris has conceded, what's next for now President-elect Donald Trump? Washington Bureau Chief Mike Viqueira takes an in-depth look in today's Political Minute.
America has decided on a new president. Now, what happens next? I'm Mike Viqueira with News Nation in Washington. Now that Decision Desk HQ projects Donald Trump to win the White House, becoming the first president in more than 120 years to lose office and then win it back, what can we expect as Donald Trump goes from president-elect to his inauguration as the 47th president? Here are some important events in the process. On December 11th, states appoint electors. On December 17th, those electors vote in their states. On December 25th, Christmas Day, electoral votes are received by Congress. And then on January 6th, Congress counts them up, with the sitting Vice President, Kamala Harris, presiding over that session. Former President Trump is then sworn into office on January 20th. In the meantime, the president-elect will be going through nominees to fill out his new cabinet. I'm Mike Viqueira, and this is the News Nation Political Minute.
That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Bianca Facchinei. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel, and come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.